morning, gladiators. Welcome. It is Monday. Yay, we made it through the weekend. And now it's time to get our week started. So let's go ahead and click on to Schoology. All right, so you're going to notice something different today. I had to add a folder, and I should have done this from day one, but I forgot. Miss Martinez made a little teeny weeny boo-boo. But I have corrected it now. So you'll notice this first grading period, August 24th, this is where your folders will be. So please use this main folder to locate your weekly folders for the first 9 weeks. And I apologize for that. I should have done that from the very start. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move the folder up. We are working on week of September 14th through the 18th. All right. I'm going to go ahead and publish that. Okay. And we will click on week of September 14th to the 18th, and we are going to click on Monday, September 14th, 2020. Okay, you'll notice your week at a glance is there. So today we're learning about adaptation and modification. So what you're going to do is you're going to review the slides to describe ways people have been impacted by physical processes and how they have adapted to their physical environment. So think of it like this. You're thinking of, let's think of Texas. We have this Texas weather, right? It's either hot or it's cold. And it can be hot, 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 hot. And then it gets cold for a day or two, and then guess what happens day 3? It gets hot again, right? I always say that Texas, or at least San Antonio, has 2 seasons, right? We have hot and hotter, because we really don't have a really good winter here. But let's go ahead and look at this. So when we're talking about human adaptation and modification, we're talking about how humans are adapting to the location that they live in, right? So we're going back to Texas. It's hot, 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 hot. Then we have to get used to having our shorts one day, and then the next day we're wearing sweaters, right? But let's think about this. What if we were moving to Antarctica, right? The North Pole, or the Arctic area, right? So if we're moving over to the North Pole and I decide I'm going to go to Antarctica for 2 weeks, what will I probably pack? Am I going to pack the clothes that I'm used to wearing here in Texas, in San Antonio? Or am I going to wear something or pack something that I know is going to keep me warm when I go to Antarctica? I like to go to Taos, New Mexico a lot. So when we go to Taos, I already know it's going to be cold up in the mountains, right? So I always pack sweaters. And even though it's not cold here, I know that I have to pack sweaters and mittens and earmuffs and things that I know I'm going to need while I'm up in the mountains. So I have to adapt to that climate change, right? And so think about how it's hot in one area, but it's cold in another. So people tend to they have to adapt to that. Sometimes they're going to have to modify their environment to fit their needs. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the slides. Okay, so I'm going to skip through this part because this is something that we're going to do together in class. All right, so let's look at the slides. So human environment interactions. So the impact people and nature have on each other and how people react to or change the earth. So we know that there are certain parts of the areas where you get tornadoes. Think of California right now. Look at all the wildfires. Let's think of how climate is changing and look what's happening look at this picture. If you look at this picture, you can see that there's a lot of sinkholes. You know, things are starting to crack, right? Because it's too hot. And then you have some areas that have adapted to change. We learned in the video last week that people, you might start having people, because of the environment, you may have people start making, growing crops or growing plants, but they're going to be doing it in elevation, right? They're going to be building up, growing them up versus putting them all in the ground. So that's changing, right? We are modifying how we used to do things because of the way things are happening in our environment. Nature has really taken its course, and we have seen that, it's either really hot, so there's not enough rain to help with crops or to even help with our grass, right? If you look outside, a lot of people's grass is dry. Then you have to think about, are the animals getting enough water? Is there enough water in the lake? Think about a couple years ago when there wasn't enough water in the lakes, and that's because we weren't getting enough rain. And then sometimes we get too much rain, and that really impacts us. So if you look at this picture, this could be either because of too much rain or the moisture of the snow, right? So several things are going to affect how you do things. So people have to not only adapt to that change, but they have to figure out how they're going to modify the environment to fit their needs. So if you look at this picture here, you'll see that they have step farming, right? So think of steps, you're going up the steps, right? Even though it's spelled Steppe, here that's the best way of remembering. Like you're climbing up a step. So this is called step farming, and this is something that's been they used to do back in the Incas, the Mayans, right? The Aztecs. They formulated this, and over in Asia, you'll see even today a lot of step farming. Okay, so geographic factors, the natural features of a place like vegetation, climate, landforms, and natural. So we're thinking about things that are supernatural, things that is out of our control. It was already here when Earth was born, right? The nature of it. And in certain areas, there are things that you are not going to be able to do. Look at this picture. Are you going to be able to grow crops here? Probably not, right? Because you don't see, it's all sand. There's no rain, right? It might be really hot during the day, but at night, more than likely, the desert's going to be super cold. Then you have this pretty landfall, this waterfall here, right? So it's all going to vary based on location. If you look at the United States map, you have the Appalachian Mountains, which you'll learn about a lot in the 8th grade. This is super important, these Appalachian Mountains. You have the Great Plains here, but look at here. Look at how many mountains. Look at how many mountains, or how much of the United States, almost a quarter of it is full of mountains. And a lot of times we don't think about that, right? We think of these states. I mean, yeah, there's states here in between, but the majority of it is a mountain region. So altitude or elevation, so the vertical distance above or below the Earth's surface, we're talking about getting up high in altitude, right? If you go up too high, you could probably lose oxygen, you won't be able to breathe. So we have to think about what can a body take? How much can it handle, right? So we are constantly having to make modifications based on altitude or even elevation, not just climate, but even people that live in the mountains, they may have to make some changes. So physical processes is a change in the land's features caused by nature or the earth itself. So remember a few minutes ago, we had a picture where the earth was cracking, or the pavement. Well, this is because it could be because of heat, or if it's too much rain, then obviously that moisture is going to go through, and sometimes it will cause it to crack. Then you have volcanoes. I mean, this big surge is probably because of either a tsunami, right? It's going to elevate the rise of that water. Those waves are going to get really high. So the effects of physical processes. So if you look at this picture, I mean, I bet this was pretty scary to these animals, right? Can you imagine the fault line is finally cracking? You're cracking the parts of the earth where they stand, right? And it's unexpected. Then you have some other areas. I mean, look at this picture. This is either caused by either an earthquake or even a monsoon, right? So we have this thing called the Richter scale, and this measures the energy waves emitted by earthquakes. And obviously, they feel this a lot in California. We're lucky where we haven't felt this, but a lot of people, even in Mexico, usually encounter a lot of earthquakes. People in Asia encounter earthquakes, and after an earthquake, usually if the earthquake is big enough, if it goes over a certain part of the Richter scale, I would say around right here, then more than likely you're going to have a tsunami effect later that will affect the opposite side of the ocean. Geographic barriers, so any natural feature that isolates a region or makes movement to a place difficult. So we do have people, we're going to be learning about traditional economic systems. For the most part, these people live up in the mountains and they make it work. They are not poor, they just live within their means. So we have to think about how people live, and a lot of times they have to modify their environment. They probably have step farming, or they feel like, okay, we're way up here. There's certain things that we can't have up here, but they make it work, right? So these geographic barriers sometimes may be in the way. A mountain is going to be in the way. That is a barrier. It does cause movement to be very difficult, right? To go up and down and up and down. So, but people have adapted to it. People have created homes in this area. Maybe per se, not in this picture per se, but there are some people that live up in the mountains, and we'll learn about that soon. Then you have your human factor. So these are ways that humans affect the environment. So how many people are interacting with the environment? So think about what we learned on Friday. You have urban versus rural, right? People are leaving the rural areas, the country, and they're moving to the urban areas. Why? Because there's resources, because there are jobs, because you have access to adequate health care, you have access to education, right? You have access to these all the schools and shops, HEBs, Targets, WalMarts. Whereas in a rural area, you're very limited, right? We talked about how you may just have one family doctor that does not specialize in certain treatments. You may or maybe have one or two little mom and pop shops. Maybe there's one school that everyone shares, and there's not enough jobs. So we have to think about why people would leave the rural area to go to the urban area. But then how does that affect it once they all come? Now you have a lot of people, right? And the more people you have, the more resources you're going to use. So think about how people are extracting those natural resources. We're going to talk a lot about desertification and what is it that we're doing that's affecting our earth. Okay, people are now having to make transportation routes, building urban areas. Somebody had asked me, Ms. Martinez, so what happens to all this land, these people that live in these areas, and we're building within their homes? Unfortunately, that rural area can eventually turn into an urban area, into a city. So think about the story that I told you last week about Helotes. When I was a little girl, I'd come to Helotes. It was miles and miles and miles of darkness. There was nothing here but woods and animals. I remember seeing wild animals everywhere. And Bandera Road was probably just, I remember it being two lanes, one going back, going south, the other one going north or east and west. Yeah, south and north. So when you think about that, they you know, that was a lot of miles of travel. And I remember, I'm like, why do we come here? There's nothing here. And then over time, and I remember saying, I'll never move to Helotes. There's nothing there. And over time, I ended up liking the area, like the country living, but the country living was soon gone. I could go outside, look outside my backyard. I would see cows and horses. And now I don't see that. So the urban area eventually built within the rural area and eliminated that country living. And now we have this little city, which we now call Helotes. At one time it was a town, now it's a city. So you'll see that impact. So adaptation. So these are adjustments that people make in their lives to better fit an environment. So this is to better fit their needs. That's the most important thing, is how are we going to fit our environment? How are we going to get used to this, right? Adaptation is getting used to a situation, the adjustments that you have to make. So think about this picture. This picture, they're adapting to the weather, right? They're going to add all this wood here, but eventually they're going to take it down. So it's not like they're modifying, because they're not making any changes. They're just adding wood to protect them from the storms. And this picture here is they've adapted to living in the water, right? They added these stilts, so they've adapted to it. This is the best way. So this could be a form of adaptation and modification, because not only do they know that the water will rise, if the water rises, your house is probably going to be gone, right? So they've added these stills. So this could be a form of both adaptation and modification. So they had to modify the environment to fit their needs, but they had to get used to it too, because like, it is what it is. This is what we're going to have. We're going to get a lot of rain. We're probably going to have a lot of water surge. So let's go ahead and build these stilts to modify our homes so we can get used to living in this area. So that one could be a little bit of both. So modifications are changes people make to the natural environment to meet their needs. So this is something that you need to do in order for it to meet your needs. So this has to be something like, think of the trains. At one time, it was all horse and carriage, right? Horse and carriage. So over time, as we continued to grow, as we went past the Appalachian Mountains that I told you we'll learn in 8th grade, when we went past the Appalachian Mountains, we couldn't just walk, right? I mean, that's a lot of walking to walk from the 13 colonies all the way west towards California. So over time, they started building these tracks. Thanks to the people from Asia who came down to help us, we created a tracking system, we built railway, and even through the mountains. Look at this picture. I mean, at one time, that was all mountain. So imagine excavating that so people can make a path for people to be able to go across the mountains. So that's very interesting how we adapt, how we make these. We know this is our situation, but now we got to modify it. We need to change it to fit the needs that we need to have, right? So if I want to live here, but I can't because there's a mountain in the way, what can I do? Oh yeah, let's build a tunnel. And now I can live on this side of the mountain and I can travel to the opposite side and I can go to work. So we're modifying, we're making changes. And we're going to learn so much about that all year round. Okay. All right. So after you get done with your slide, you will then go back to Monday. And you're going to click on Adaptation and Modification. You're going to answer the questions on the Google form. Okay, and you'll click there on Adaptation and Modification. Again, remember you have one try, so please take your time. All right, and when you're done, I will receive a notification that you have completed this. All right, my angels, I can't wait to see you later on this morning. Have a wonderful day. See you later, gladiators.